I'm Will Hamilton, and I'm a senior at the University of Idaho in the Virtual Technology and Design program, and I was a writer and producer on Solitude 6.
My name is George Hager, and I'm a senior in the VTD program at the University of Idaho, and I was the lead artist and writer on Solitude 6.
My name is Ian McGrath. I was the tech lead of this project. I am a senior at the VTD program at the University of Idaho.
Solitude 6 is a VR narrative thriller, and it's set in the far future, and you take control of a volunteer. And you do simple repair jobs around Solitude 6. Some of the story elements I wanted to include in this project were slow burn horror, lots of suspense, and we talked a lot, and we wanted to avoid the traditional scare tactics of like horror movies and games, such as jump scares and using music to denote when something was going to happen. So we focused a lot on innate human fears such as darkness, isolation, and heights.
Solitude 6 is heavily inspired by a lot of the sci-fi horror classics like Alien, and we wanted to include some of the pulpy influences in there too, like Event Horizon. And we wanted to pull from all of the best sci-fi inspirations and then see where we could take it.
Through this project, a lot changed. Mainly the narrative, as well as lots of the user interactions that were present. Originally, this was envisioned as more of a straightforward horror, and we lovingly named it Demons and Robots for a while, and then it became Solitude 6. Given the short time frame for this project, we ended up having to focus a lot on the environment and atmosphere rather than the narrative elements.
I think there's a skepticism about the believability of VR working the way that it does. People put it on and then they'll say that it looks like that's the world that they teleported into, and then other people will hear that and think it's a gimmick, and then they change their minds as soon as the headset's on, and everything works a whole lot better. Our main form of movement was to use the track system and lock the player in, and that was being built right away to work with everything that was supposed to happen in the world. We spent about 3 weeks doing research just about nonstop for all things that were motion sickness related. And we even built some prototypes. Some of those included a point and click sort of navigation system that you would point at a location that you wanted to go to, and it would either teleport you directly there, or it would do a slow slew into that destination. There were a lot of design ideas that we had and we had built prototypes for, but the code wasn't moving along fast enough to finish those ideas, and so we had a couple of things that had taken a week of development that were just pulled out of the project.
It hurts me every time we have to cut something out of it. Like, it's like cutting a piece of myself. I think the most daunting part about VR is that it's such a new medium that it doesn't really have any rules established yet. And so I feel we're sort of in a growing pain area of VR right now. There are no rules, so nothing's really good, but nothing's really bad either. I am really, really sim sick a lot of the times, and so I was the primary guinea pig for any movement systems we had to determine whether or not it was going to make people sick.
So the key goal was to make a complicated scene with a whole lot of moving parts and to not have the player get motion sick in that scene. So starting into here, there was a project that we did last semester where the player was just kind of along for the ride and there wasn't much to do except hitting a few buttons. But this time around, we have a lot of tools that the player can interact with, and those can influence the environment. Typically, before we put people in the headset, we would talk about what the project was, and I would say what my design goals for the project were, and then Will and George would talk about what the story was. And so people being skeptical before even stepping into the headset, That was a little bit tough to even convince people to put the thing on. But once they were in, then they were pretty locked in real quick, just because that first scene is pretty complicated, and then there's a lot to do in the later scenes.
I was actually really excited with the user response, because when you're really close to a project for an extended period of time, it can feel like, it's like when you move up really close to a painting and all you can see are the brush strokes and it just looks terrible, and you have to take like 10 steps back and be like, oh, it makes a hole. And then you show it to somebody else and they don't even see the brush strokes, and you can fully appreciate it. Over the course of this project, I learned a lot about how to use VR in a way that doesn't make people sick, but it still engages them fully. And we explored that through a lot of things. It feels like a lot of VR developers look at VR as a design problem rather than a design solution. So we wanted to play with that and see just how far we could push it.